Is that right? Clerk Aguilar? We have a quorum. I'm seeing. I think there. Stacy's camera is not on, but her name is on the screen.
She said, you see her name because the iPad is on, but she's going to be here in present or in person.
She's on her way.
Yes.
Can we go ahead and start with, yes, okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Deborah Lockwood, Chair of the Washington County Planning Commission. Today is December 6th, 2023, and today's meeting of the Planning Commission is called to order. May we have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Fry,
Present.
Commissioner Havener,
Present.
Commissioner Kaiser. Commissioner Kaiser indicated that he would be joining us at 1:45. And Commissioner Milliman as well would be joining us in about 5 to 10 minutes. Commissioner Maury Bidu.
Present.
Commissioner Will.
Present.
Vice Chair Dye is absent today. Chair Lockwood.
Present.
Thank you. Currently we have, and Commissioner Podar just joined us.
Present. I use she, her pronouns. Thank you.
Looks like we have 6 present planning commissioners, and we do have a quorum.
Thank you. Before we begin our formal agenda today, I wanted to address how we participate in our PC meetings. We're an advisory body to the Washington County Board of Commissioners. As public officials, it's important we conduct these meetings in a professional and respectful manner. I think this is how we maintain public trust in our work. We all bring different perspectives and opinions to these matters, and reasonable people can disagree. This is a reminder to you about my expectations, and I think the community's expectations that we treat each other and staff and community members with respect. I also expect that planning commissioners will approach this work from a neutral standpoint and with a learning mindset. So with that, I expect a productive and respectful meeting, and again, welcome. Director's report, please.
Thank you, Chair Lockwood. My name is Erin Wardell. I'm the Planning and Development Services Manager here at Washington County. Today, for something a little bit different, we have some PowerPoint slides to go along with our Director's report. Before I go through the slides, though, we'll cover some of the typical announcements. I wanted to share that on November 28th, the Board of Commissioners continued the hearing on Ordinance number 899 related to the North Plains Urban Growth Boundary Expansion to July 16th of 2024. We will discuss this timeline more during tonight's presentation on that particular ordinance. For today's Planning Commission meeting, you will have a work session on the Significant Natural Resources Update. You will then have a hearing on Ordinance number 899, the North Plains Urban Growth Boundary Expansion. For your next 2 upcoming meetings, December 20th and January 3rd, staff have no items scheduled, and so we would recommend canceling if that is what the Planning Commission would like to do, given the timing around the holidays and then immediately following the holidays. We thought that might be something the Planning Commission would be interested in, so you can consider that later in your meeting. So with that, I'd like to cover some slides that we put together for tonight. Again, as an opportunity to ground all of you in the work of the Planning Commission and planning commissions within the state of Oregon, we put together some background slides. We will be following up on this presentation with an email, and that email will have some reading materials for you. So within that email, you will have the Community Development Code text references to planning commissions. There is a Planning Commission handbook prepared by the State Department of Land Conservation and Development, and we'll include that. And then Ethical Principles in Planning from the American Planning Association. Staff found this to be a really helpful document, and we thought that the Planning Commission may find it helpful as well. So I wanted to start by talking a little bit about the history of planning commissions in Oregon. Planning commissions go back to 1919 when the Oregon legislature allowed cities to plan for orderly growth in their communities. They enabled cities through legislation at that time to establish planning commissions, and at that time, planning commissions were required to approve subdivision plats. After World War II, there was so much growth happening in certain places in Oregon, and I suspect Washington County specifically was one of these. So counties were also authorized to create planning commissions to deal with rapid growth that was causing increasing urban problems in unincorporated areas. I think there's a lot of really interesting history there specific to Washington County. So all jurisdictions in Oregon have planning commissions, and they are guided by Oregon state statutes. So there's two specific statutes cited here on the slide. Essentially what these statutes do is give the governing bodies the authority to establish planning commissions and delegate planning decision-making processes to those planning commissions. So specifically, the second statute cited up there gives planning commissions the opportunity to recommend governing board action on land use ordinances. So Senate Bill 100 is a really important landmark piece of legislation. I think it is not an overstatement to say it is one of the things that made Oregon what Oregon is today. It passed in 1973. One of the most interesting things about Senate Bill 100 was how much bipartisan support it had at that time, and it passed by a substantial margin in both chambers of the legislature. While it remains controversial, and it's oftentimes something that is talked about either in the courts, in the legislature, and certainly in our local governments as well, it's been really important as the framework that established land use planning in Oregon, how we do land use planning. I'm from Oregon originally, but I went to college as an undergrad in New York, and I have a bachelor's degree in urban and regional studies. We talked about Oregon in school all the time, and people would ask me questions about being from Oregon because it's so interesting to people in the rest of the country. So Washington County's Community Development Code responds to these statutory requirements by establishing various planning participants and specifying their roles. So I will cover a few of these various planning participants in the next few slides, but the participants identified in our code are the Board of Commissioners, the Planning Commission, the Director, our Hearings Officer, and then three different groupings of community members. So the Board of County Commissioners is the first of the planning participants. The Board of Commissioners are elected by the voters of Washington County. Essentially, the board is the final decision maker. They are the policy and ultimate decision-making body for the county, except in cases where something else is allowed for by the charter or by the state of Oregon. So on legislative plan amendments, the board considers planning commission recommendations as a part of their decision-making process. The board's decision then is guided by statutory and legal frameworks, and the board's decision can be appealed on these legislative matters, not the Planning Commission's recommendation. The Planning Commission is the next of the planning participants. Planning Commission members, as you know, are appointed by the board. There is some language within our Community Development Code that's actually beyond what I've put on the slide here, and we will again share this with you for your information, but I put the most relevant pieces of information, I thought, for this presentation up there. But essentially what this says is the Board of Commissioners has delegated to you the authority to advise them on legislative matters. They additionally can delegate other planning activities to the Planning Commission. So for Washington County, the Planning Commission's primary responsibilities are, again, advisory on legislative plan amendments and a decision-making role on urban quasi-judicial plan amendments. Next, the planning participants is the director. So in Washington County, the Director of Land Use and Transportation delegates most of these responsibilities to the Planning and Development Services Manager. It can then be further delegated to other staff. Essentially, staff's role with the Planning Commission is to provide you with administrative and technical support. So we're here to help run these meetings from a technical standpoint and run them from a logistics standpoint. But the Planning Commission is responsible really for running the majority of these meetings themselves. So we're here for professional expertise and staff assistance. And then finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about ethics. The Planning Commission members are subject to the jurisdiction of the Oregon Ethics Commission and the Oregon government ethics laws because you are public officials. From the American Planning Association Ethical Principles and Planning Guide, I've copied some text up here on the slide. Again, we will send this to you after the meeting. But I thought these 3 principles were really important. The planning process must continuously pursue and faithfully serve the public interests. Planning process participants continuously strive to achieve high standards of integrity and proficiency so that public respect for the planning process will be maintained. And this last point applies to APA members, which is most of the staff here, but I think that it's something all of us can keep in mind, which is that APA members who are practicing planners continuously pursue improvement in their planning competence as well as in the development of peers and aspiring planners. They recognize that enhancement of planning as a profession leads to greater public respect for the planning process and thus serves the public interest. So at the end of the day, I think we're all here for our communities and to do the best that we can for our communities. So as a part of continuing these conversations and continuing our training, staff will be preparing a Planning Commission training for the entire commission at a group, likely at your first February meeting. We intend for this to be an annual occurrence. It'll be a review of the materials that you received at your individual training when you first joined the PC, but we'll tailor it, of course, for the entire group. And then we'll also be working on preparing Planning 101 and Transportation Planning 101 presentations. I think that'll be really helpful. Background, technical, and academic information about why we do the work we do and how we do the work we do. And we'll be looking for some time to schedule those in the spring. So that is a longer director's report than we usually cover, but that is it for today. Thank you, Chair Lockwood.
Thank you, Ms. Morwadell. Do we have any questions from the Planning Commission members or comments?
I'll have one.
Commissioner Milliman.
Thank you, Chair Lockwood. I was going to do this at the end, but I put together some thoughts. Nobody asked me to do this. I was hoping North Plains would be here, and I wanted to say I'm sorry for my wording and lack of tact in the way I addressed the group from North Plains last meeting. And what I wanted to say about it is that my intention wasn't to put them on the spot or be accusatory. I know about me that I'm not great with little notice. And so in other venues, I compensate for that by prepping. So I write things down, I get them to people early. So I got ahead of myself, was worried I wouldn't get to ask my questions, and so chose my words poorly. In the future, and I have talked with staff about it, if I had do-overs, I would have known North Plains was coming, and I would have been happy to send them written questions in advance so that they could have prepared. And maybe that's something we could look at in the future. And then the last thing I wanted to say is I thought my questions were relevant in the sense that there's literally a recent newspaper article about Morrow County and some ethical concerns around land development. And I had also heard things specific to North Plains. So it did feel sort of topical to me. And if anybody wants to talk about it further, I'm absolutely available, and we'll try to do better this meeting. That's what I got.
And you're open to any comments that anyone might want to make in response? Okay. Are there any comments? I'm not seeing anything, so thank you. Commissioner Podar, you have your hand up.
Thank you. I want to first applaud and thank Commissioner Milliman for her words, but I also want to support their questions from the last meeting, because we have also heard of there's an article about Commissioner Dan Ryan and Commissioner Carmen Rubio at the City of Portland for without due process handing out land use permits, and it's a whole article in Willamette Weekly. And so as community representatives, twice community brought this concern up about personal interest um, regarding North Plains land use twice, which went unnoticed and unheard by our commission. So I really appreciate Commissioner Milliman for having the courage to ask the questions, wordings, yes. We are constantly, even as commissioners, we are constantly being sent things to look at last minute. We do not get time to prepare. We do not get time to prepare tactful questions and wordings, and we are put on the spot to make decisions and say things. And so I really do applaud the courage that it took to ask those questions, because I know that as a person of color, I couldn't have done that, even though it was right there in my head. And it was a cause of great concern, because all of us every single year have to file a document with the state of Oregon that says that we have no personal interest in any of the uh, 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 discussions that we will be discussing as a planning commission. So I want to say that first, thank you. And also, this is a cause of concern, and every public official, no matter who, is answerable to the community about how we stand to directly or indirectly benefit from any decisions that are made. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Podar. Anyone else? Commissioner Havener.
Just a point of clarification. I appreciate Stacy's approach to wanting to find out more information, but I wondered what's the appropriate process for planning commissioners to reach out to an applicant, or in this case, the city, in a one-on-one basis, and not sharing that information with the entire planning commission?
Maybe staff has a comment on that.
I'm going to
So
defer.
this is,
Go ahead, Rob.
I'm not exactly 100% sure what you're asking, Commissioner. Is it in the context of a particular application, in this case, North Plains? And so you're wanting direction on whether you should communicate directly with the city of North Plains about this matter?
Right. That's just the example at this point. Is Stacy suggested, Commissioner Milliman suggested that if she had the opportunity to reach out with questions before they showed up at the hearing, she could be better informed. But I don't know if that's the appropriate steps that we should take as a planning commission individually.
Now I understand. So no, I would caution you about reaching out to parties in a matter generally, particularly in a quasi-judicial matter. Now, North Plains is a legislative matter, but even in that matter, my recommendation to you is that you have questions about process, or what you've received, what you haven't received, if you have additional questions, my recommendation would be that you send those to LUT staff, and that if they need further information from resources, essentially let them do the work for you, the homework for you. So that would be my recommendation, is that you reach out to LUT staff for any additional information you need as a general matter.
And we have done that before, and I believe we did that on this matter as well, where some questions were raised and we received the answers from North Plains and worked that into our staff report.
Thank you, Chair Lockwood. That's actually exactly what I meant. Like, I did not know North Plains was going to be here, and I looked at the agenda and I looked where I could have looked. So I didn't see my opportunity to ask questions through the process before the meeting. So maybe I need to pay more attention. But yes, I would like, future state would like to be able to give questions to the Planning Commission, to give to North Plains or whoever's going to be here, so that we can all be better prepared. I think it's kind of an introvert feature. I know a lot of people that function that way, so maybe we could do that.
Any other comments? Okay. I think we're ready to move on to our work session. Significant natural resources.
Good afternoon, Chair Lockwood and Planning Commissioners. I'm Michelle Miller, Senior Planner with Land Use and Transportation. I'm here to give you a brief update on the work we've been doing with our Significant Natural Resources Limited Goal 5 program update. So here's the overview of the presentation today. We'll take a look at the schedule, the inventory work that we've been doing, and our most recent outreach efforts, and tell you a little bit about some of the preliminary feedback that we've been receiving on the project. Our Goal 5 process is laid out in the Oregon Administrative Rules. This graphic shows the 3 main steps and our general timeline for accomplishing these steps. I was last at the Planning Commission back in June, and as we began our inventory work. So we're now working through wrapping up the inventory phase. While that work is going on, we've begun to think about the impacts that our land uses in the urban area have on our natural resources, which is step 2, known as the ESEE analysis phase. As we work through those impacts, we'll be thinking about some of the code concepts that support the analysis and the decisions that we're making about our resources. So here's the project schedule broken down by the various tasks within the Goal 5 process. The bulk of the time has been spent on updating our natural resources inventory. We've held the first of 2 planned community forums back in October that I'll be talking about a little bit later in the presentation. The next one, we will be sharing our code concepts with the stakeholders and getting some feedback on the options later next year. So there'll be another community forum and an online open house to get that feedback in, we're thinking now spring of 2024, and there'll be public hearings next summer with the board adopting new regulations by our due date of October 1st, 2024. So here are some of the terms that we use to describe our natural resources that we've mapped and will be including in our inventory maps. The habitat is the place where the plant or animal species lives and grows. We have 2 types. The riparian, which includes the streams and water areas and those areas adjacent to the streams. The upland wildlife habitat generally goes beyond the riparian habitat and can include forest patches that provide the habitat for the wildlife. So to review our inventory process with you, here was our starting point for the inventory. Looking at 2 inventories, our county significant natural resource inventory and the metro regionally significant fish and wildlife habitat inventory. And this slide shows those comparisons a bit zoomed in for the county and the metro maps within the Bethany area. An unincorporated area north of Highway 26 that has seen a lot of development in the past 40 years. The county's significant natural resources map is on the left with the water-related riparian habitat in blue and the wildlife habitat in green. The metro map is to the right. So these resources are upland habitat in shades of green and riparian in shades of blue. The metro significant natural resource inventory are classified a bit differently. They're based on a quality of habitat, which the county's maps don't contain that level of detail. So our consultant team has worked to combine these maps through our ArcGIS computer system so that we have one consolidated map of significant natural resources that have been inventoried, as well as what we anticipate to be possibly regulating. So using the county and metro maps within our map refinement study area, our consultants combined the data in both maps and consolidated it into one map. These adjustments were made to the map to take out areas that have been developed and where natural resources have been better identified through the development review process. We then conducted a manual review and are cleaning up the data where needed and incorporating the city community plan data for areas that have been added to the urban growth boundaries since the county's original inventory was done in the 1980s. So an important component of the inventory update after the maps were consolidated was to determine the sites that could be considered significant natural resources as part of the inventory process. We came up with a way of looking at the data by using different GIS layers like aerials and tax lot data that we had at our disposal. So we began by removing clearly developed sites, smaller upland habitat patches, properties that had been through the development review process and then had followed the current significant natural resource regulations, and during manual review, those sites that had no visible remaining habitat or very, very small patches on individual lots. So here's an example of that consolidated draft inventory map of that same Bethany area from the earlier slides. You can see the areas of blue that represent the riparian habitat, and the upland wildlife habitat are the shades of orange and yellow. When the metro and county maps were consolidated, the county's original wildlife habitat had areas where they overlapped with metro's riparian habitat or upland. And the mapped yellow areas show the county's original wildlife habitat where it didn't overlap with another natural resource category and are still considered a significant natural resource. The green on the map areas show open spaces and parks that are existing. We are continuing to make refinements to these maps and the manual review process. So a very important aspect of this project has been our focus on community engagement that I want to share with you next. As you know, over the summer, we spread the word about this project through attending various community events from Cornelius to Cedar Mill, Aloha, and Tualatin. Last October, we mailed a letter to property owners with map significant natural resources on our draft maps, letting them know about the project, upcoming events, and about an interactive web mapping tool our GIS team developed for people to use to look up their property and see where the draft resources had been identified. So we advertised the event on social media and direct emails to 110 people that were on the interested parties list at the time. So I also wanted to note that we had bilingual events with all the materials in Spanish and English, and other translation services were available upon request. We have presented and are happy to present it to interested community-based organization, and that work has been ongoing. So here's a screenshot of the property owner resource tool where property owners can learn more about the project, look up their property on an interactive map, and give us comments through the web tool. And here's the front page of the online open house website that ran from October to November 10th. It included more detailed project background information and was very similar to the materials that were available at the community forum that was held on October 24th. So our outreach efforts have been met with some success. We now have over 400 people that are tracking this project and are on the interested parties list. Over 260 property owners viewed or commented on the property owner online mapping lookup tool. 312 people attended the in-person community forum that signed up on our sign-up sheets. 70 people commented on the online open house, and we've received over 50 emails, phone calls about the project separately from any of those other resource tools. So we've received a varied response about the project so far. As we're still at the inventory phase with the project, most feedback has been in the form of questions about the work and the process that we are going through. Some people are supportive of the developing natural resource regulations and updates to the map. Many had questions about how it's being designated with natural resources on their property. How does that affect them? Regulations that could limit what they're currently allowed to do on their property, like removing trees or adding structures. And some were concerned about how the natural resource regulations could impact their future development potential. A number of property owners believed the mapping was inaccurate or that there were no significant habitat on their property, and were addressing those on an individual basis. So moving on to the next steps for the project. After our inventory work is complete, the next step is all about analyzing those impacts through the ESEE analysis. And that's the economic, social, environmental, and energy impacts to get us to the development of the Goal 5 program, filing the ordinance, and the hearing process next summer that you all be great participants in. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or any comments that you might have about this update.
Commissioners, any questions or comments? Commissioner Milliman.
Thanks, Chair Lockwood. I just wanted to say I really liked that you had the statistics around how many people engaged with the website and that you're closing the loop to respond to them. That's a big deal, and I know it's a lot of work. So thank you.
Commissioner Fry.
I have a question for after the process is complete. I know there were some concerns that you mentioned on here where people question if they have significant natural resources actually on their property. Once this mapping is complete and the process is done, will people who maybe didn't kind of have the question or raise the questions now have an opportunity to have those reviewed? I know I've definitely personally seen things where they're mapped and you walk out there and you can't figure out why they possibly would be. So I'm just curious if property owners will have future options available to them.
Sure. So we have done this is really in draft form at this point, and one of the main purposes for letting the 4,000 private property owners know about the project, we sent a mailer to them, and sure a lot of people maybe weren't able to respond or get track that. And we're taking those initial comments and revising our maps or taking a deeper look at some of these individual property owners. And then we'll have a kind of a final draft report available. But there'll also be a hearing process where you may hear as a planning commissioner someone coming and saying that they don't believe the maps are accurate. And we expect to find some of that. We will be incorporating through our regulations opportunity to make changes to the map even once it's been finalized and approved by the Board of County Commissioners is one way. Everyone that has mapped natural resources will receive another written notice letting them know about the hearing process that we will be going through. So I anticipate we'll be seeing probably a few more people that didn't make it to this round. Did you have something to add, Teresa?
Well, I was just going to say, I think you touched on it with something in our regulations. Mm-hmm. So the regulations will include, we've talked about it, whether it's a map refinement process or doing it through the development review process, but there'll be some form of ability to do that refinement even after the map is adopted.
Thank you.
Not seeing any other hands up, so I'd like to say I'm really grateful that you're doing this work. As you mentioned, the old map dates from the 1980s, so we really need a more up-to-date picture of natural resources in Washington County. I'm really interested in whether there will be changes to code and what they will be, but it sounds like you're not at the point yet where you would have any kind of comment. Is that right?
That's right. We're working through the inventory. You're right. It was really important to understand where the natural resources are located, and then we're moving on kind of in the background doing the ESEE analysis, and that's the part where we are right now to get us to the point of developing regulations. So it's a little bit iterative and circular, but we're hoping we're progressing nicely to be meeting our timeline for adoption in October.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Commissioners, any other comments or questions?
I'll just add one thing, that we will come back again. Not sure yet, we don't have that planned. It could be before we do the next public open house, to tell you more about the code concepts
Right.
that we're talking about. So we'll plan that.
And then we'll also have a technical advisory committee meeting coming up early next year as well. And that's yet to be scheduled.
Okay.
Look for something in your mailbox.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Not seeing any, so thank you very much for the presentation.
You're welcome.
Next item, looks like you're sticking around. All right. Next item is deliberations on ordinance number 899, and we have a staff report to start.
I'll just introduce myself for the record. Teresa Cherniak, Principal Planner with Community Planning, and Todd Borkowitz is going to give the presentation.
And good afternoon, Chair Lockwood and Commissioner Milliman and other members online. I'm Todd Borkowitz, Senior Planner in Community Planning with the Department of Land Use and Transportation. Today, we're continuing the hearing on Ordinance number 899, the proposed expansion of the North Plains urban growth boundary. So we're going to do a little bit of a overview and refresher here. So Oregon law requires cities to plan for 20 years of growth, 20 years of housing growth. It allows for cities to plan for 20 years of economic growth based on types of industry that a city aims to attract. Cities must accommodate this growth forecast within their existing UGBs, or when that forecasted growth cannot be accommodated, cities can follow a state-prescribed process for UGB expansion based on state-defined criteria. So North Plains followed this process, and Washington County and other partners collaborated. Here again is the proposed North Plains UGB expansion area. It's area shaded in gray. It's approximately 855 acres, including 167 acres for housing and 688 acres for employment land. Here again is what Ordinance 899 does. Prior to state consideration, the county must adopt a UGB identical to the city's UGB and then reflect the change in the county's comprehensive planning documents. The county's Ordinance 899 does just that. It proposes minor map amendments to the Rural Natural Resource Plan and the Comprehensive Framework Plan for the urban area to reflect the proposed UGB. After North Plains adopted its UGB expansion ordinance, the county filed ordinance number 899. On October 18th, the PC held a hearing on this ordinance, closed the hearing, and continued deliberations to November 15th. On November 15th, the PC discussed the ordinance, then continued deliberations to December 6th, today. In presentations made at these meetings, staff communicated the policy framework guiding the ordinance, North Plains' cooperation with the county and its demonstration of its land need, state criteria for UGB expansion outside of Metro, and steps the city followed to meet the criteria, and lastly, information on a referendum petition on the city's UGB expansion ordinance. So to date, the PC and Board of Commissioners received over 100 letters and emails on Ordinance 899, heard oral testimony from 36 individuals, and received other feedback during public communications. Comments included both support and opposition and include topics listed here. Staff shared this with PC members. Staff shared all written feedback with PC members received on this ordinance through 5 p.m. yesterday. In summary, despite some opposition to Ordinance 899, staff recognizes that the City of North Plains is required by state law to plan for future growth and will perform detailed planning for the UGB expansion area once the state acknowledges the expansion. We believe the city sufficiently followed the required process, undertook the appropriate analysis, prepared the required reports, and made appropriate findings to support the proposed UGB expansion. We also believe that the city met state requirements to determine the amount of residential and employment lands and expand the UGB into prime farmland. As you're aware, a referendum petition places the city's UGB expansion ordinance on the ballot in May 2024. This action prevents the city's ordinance from going into effect until North Plains voters decide on the matter. Therefore, the first level of UGB expansion approval is effectively on hold. So given this, the Board of Commissioners held a work session on November 14th to consider options for moving forward. The board communicated that the PC could continue deliberations and make a recommendation to the board before the May 2024 election. The board held its first hearing on Ordinance 899 on November 28th and continued the hearing to July 16th after the May 2024 election results are certified. So the impact of the referendum is uncertain, but the PC can make a recommendation on North Plains UGB expansion to the board. The board hearing on Ordinance 899 was continued to July 16th and is anticipated to occur regardless of the referendum outcome or any potential appeals to it. Any recommendation from the PC on this ordinance will not be considered by the board until the board revisits the matter at that time. So staff recommends that the PC deliberate today on Ordinance 899 and recommend approval of the ordinance to the board. The Planning Commission has several options for moving forward, and they include those listed here. So options 1 and 3 are consistent with the board's communication regarding action by the PC. Option 1 is the staff recommendation to approve Ordinance 899. Option 2 is to recommend rejection of the ordinance to the board. Option 3 is to continue to a date certain before the May 2024 election. And option 4 is to continue to June 6, 2024, which is after the May election and after the vote is certified. Oh, I'm sorry. Just to clarify, June 26. That last part. And then to aid you, we developed some sample motions here that are consistent with what I showed on the last slide. And I can go ahead and keep this up. That concludes our presentation, and we're happy to answer questions. I should also add that Steve Miller with City of North Plains is in the audience. He's the planning manager there. He's the planning manager at North Plains, and he is willing to answer any clarifying questions that you have for him. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't normally speak first. Normally, I ask for comments and questions from my fellow commissioners. So I think there is something I want to say, but if there are questions, I welcome questions for Mr. Borkowitz. Commissioner Podar.
Thank you, Chair Lockwood. Thank you, Conti and Mr. Borkowitz. I would like to make a motion. So would you like me to make the motion first, or would you like to speak first?
I'd like to speak first.
Thank you.
So Commissioner Milliman.
Thank you, Chair Lockwood. Thank you for the summary. What I think I heard is there is no news on the ballot referendum since last time we were together. Is that the summary or correct?
Trying to remember what we mentioned last time, but yes, essentially we don't have any updates on it. Okay. The county has its team. Teresa is confirming that, yes.
Yeah, so at the last meeting, the city did indicate that it had some legal questions about the referendum. The Land Conservation and Development Commission noted that it wasn't weighing in on the question of referendum and whether or not that was able to go forward, that they didn't get involved in that. And our county council has confirmed that we have the same legal opinion, that we believe the referendum is legitimate and that it has the effect of kind of staying the city's action until after the vote. And so that's still our same county position.
Yeah, and I should add that we also received a piece of testimony yesterday from Kenneth Dobson, basically that was consistent with the county's response to the to the city.
Thank you.
Questions? Commissioner Havener?
Yeah, just a couple questions. One, it was rather interesting to me, the information that came back from LCDC, where they pointed out that there was incorrect statements made by the city in their testimony regarding some of the things that were already locked in place, didn't have to. The statement about, they were held to their economic opportunity analysis that was one of the primary concerns for the farmland annexation, or the potential for farmland annexation. Do we treat that as part of testimony and what impact that has on our decision making going forward?
It is a communication that we have received, and I don't know if Rob has any feedback on whether it's testimony or not, but it is, I imagine, something that can be considered in deliberations.
And that's correct. It's not formally testimony, as you've already closed the public hearing, but it is public communication that you may take into consideration in a legislative matter such as this.
Commissioner Podar?
No, I was just waiting. I kept my hands raised so I can make the motion. Thank you. After you speak, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Fry?
Thank you. I want to, before we get further, I want to make a statement on the potential conflict of interest on this matter. I intended to make this in our October meeting, and then the testimony and everything, the whole format just was a little different than I anticipated. So I apologize for not putting this statement out there sooner in the process. I don't have an actual conflict of interest on this matter, but I have what could be considered a potential conflict of interest. Work for a small local Washington County-based builder developer in residential construction. The company's been aware of the North Plains expansion discussions, and we've followed along to some degree over the years here, as we often do when land use and development activities are taking place in the region. We've never built or developed in North Plains. We don't have any current contracts, options, or active negotiations in North Plains or the proposed expansion area. Despite these facts, it's possible that my company could in the future, or the company I work for, I should say, could in the future end up building or developing something in North Plains in this area. But since we don't have any active or current contracts or any current true conflicts of interest, I do intend to continue to participate in votes and discussions. But I did want to disclose that and just have it on the record. Thank you.
Did you want to make a comment, Mr. Bovet?
No, I just appreciate that on the record. That's perfect. I have no comment on it. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Podar? I'm not sure if you wanted to ask a question, Commissioner Podar. Was your hand just left up?
Yes, but I also now have a comment about Commissioner Frey's statement. If there is potential for conflict, even in the future, direct conflict in the future, because if the company that they work for would potentially sign up for bid for a contract, sign up for a contract, I think that's a direct conflict of interest. So that could happen with any one of us. And so how do we deal with an issue like this, considering?
Sure. If I can take that, Chair.
Yes, sure. Please.
So this is actually not a direct conflict. What the commissioner described, for the record, what is called under Oregon law a potential conflict of interest. He would have had a direct conflict of interest if there was some level of certainty that his company would have benefited financially or avoided financial detriment by, for example, constructing housing in North Plains. But at this point, it's theoretical. And so what he did and placed on the record was, in my opinion, precisely what he needed to put on the record. The difference between an actual and a potential conflict of interest is with an actual conflict of interest, which is a direct conflict of interest. He wouldn't be able to vote. With a potential conflict of interest, a theoretical conflict that may or may not ever arise, he just needs to disclose it on the record, and then he can proceed to deliberate and vote, and that's what he's done.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Bovet. That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you. So that community gets to hear what is a conflict of interest, direct and potential. Thank you.
So your hand is still up.
Chair Lockwood, I'm waiting after you speak to make the motion, so I've left my hand up. Thank you.
All right, well then I'll go ahead. Commissioner Fry.
And Chair Lockwood, if I just have a question, and I don't know if you'd like me to save that question for later or ask it now regarding our deliberation process here. I'm happy to wait if you want to get your statement out.
Yeah, why don't I go ahead? Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. With the indulgence of my colleagues, I wanted to talk about the 4 options that we have in front of us and express a couple of concerns that I have. So we're here to make a decision, make a choice among these 4 choices. Option 3 is continuing deliberations until a date certain prior to the North Plains referendum. So that one, we would be wanting to meet again and deliberate before the vote in North Plains. That one, I feel like this is our 3rd meeting of deliberations, and we've had lots of questions, lots of testimony. I kind of think that's the least attractive of these options, is to meet again sometime before the referendum. So that one I kind of put aside. And I'd like to talk about the other 3 more or less in a group and express my 2 concerns that I have. The first one is if we make a recommendation now, we're kind of out of sequence in the process. The process, as I understand it, is that North Plains develops an ordinance based on participation by their staff and their planning commission and their city council, and they've done that. They have their ordinance for this proposed expansion. And then at that point, it comes to the county. And again, there's a process where staff develops an ordinance. It comes to the planning commission. It comes to the Board of Commissioners. And then at that point, it would move on to the state. So there's this orderly stair-step process that goes on. But that process has been interrupted by the North Plains referendum. And so at this point, I feel like for us to express one way or another about this ordinance and this proposal, we're kind of out of sequence. We have to. My comfort level would be for North Plains referendum to be decided, and then if the expansion is approved by the voters of North Plains, we'd be reverting to our normal stair step, and then would be appropriate time for the Planning Commission to make a recommendation. So that's my first concern. My second concern relates to the role of the Planning Commission. And Ms. Wardell has talked about that this afternoon. We do 2 things. One is we make determinations about quasi-judicial plan amendments, and there have been a couple of those this year. The other thing we do is we advise the Board of Commissioners. Well, right now, the Board of Commissioners is continuing this matter. They're not going to be taking it up until after the referendum. So it raises a question in my mind, if we make a recommendation, who are we advising? If we make a recommendation at this time, And it seems in that case, in effect, practically speaking, we'd be making a recommendation to the voters of North Plains. We don't make recommendations to the citizens of Washington County. We advise the board again. So that's my second concern, is that it seems appropriate to me, no matter what I feel about this proposal, to let the voters decide. It's their time to weigh this proposal, to consider the merits, and their right to decide if that's what they want for their city. So what am I suggesting? That I guess I'm suggesting we make no recommendation today. And I'll open this up to comments. I think Commissioner Podar was first, and then Commissioner Fry. Oh, and then Commissioner Milliman.
Thank you, Chair Lockwood. I would like to make a motion considering the presentation that we received today and your words, Chair Lockwood. We are an advisory committee to the Board of Commissioners. However, we are community representatives. With that in mind, I would like to put forward a motion that the Planning Commission continue deliberations on Ordinance number 899 to June 26th, 2024.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there a second?
Um,
Oh,
Pardon me, Chair.
Mr. Bovet, go ahead.
I just noticed I'm hoping the Commissioner Potter will accept a minor friendly amendment because I just noticed a technical defect. Under Section 7 of our rules, we actually have to not only have a date certain, but a time certain. So really that should say June 26, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. because that's when that meeting will be held. Is that acceptable?
Perfect. I will make the motion again. Considering that we are an advisory committee to the Board of Commissioners, but we are a community representative board, I would like to make a motion that the Planning Commission continue deliberations on Ordinance number 899 to June 26th, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. after the May 21, 2024 primary elections. Thank you.
We have a motion to continue deliberations till June 26, 2024. Is there a second? And those who have their hands up, I'm not sure if your hand is up to second or...
I'll second. Rachel Moribidu.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Moribidu. It's been moved and seconded that we continue deliberations till June 2024. Discussion. Commissioner Fry, did you want to comment on that?
Commissioner Milliman was actually ahead of me. If
Okay,
she
all right.
raised her hand, I can wait for her.
Commissioner Milliman.
Thank you, Chair Lockwood and Commissioner Fry. Actually, I have two things. The first one is on the role of the Planning Commission. I've heard a lot of folks say things that sound like, well, they followed the policy, they followed the laws, and I'm sure that they did. And I do think that there's folks that verify that. I don't think that's my role. I don't think I'm qualified to say whether they followed all the rules and ordinances. I think my role is to make a recommendation based on what I hear from the community. So that's what I intend to do unless someone thinks my role is different or I'm wildly incorrect on that. So that was the first thing. And then the second thing is I am concerned about the timing. I understand we don't want to come talk about this every 2 weeks and have a presentation. What I'm concerned about is that the ballot measure falls through somehow between now and May, and it goes to the Board of Commission without Planning Commission's opportunity to have their voice in deliberation. And so I'm not sure how to solve that. I'm inclined to recommend option 3, so we just roll this a meeting forward. But I think it's certainly got its drawbacks. So I guess the question to staff, maybe question to legal, is there a scenario where the ballot measure doesn't happen and the Planning Commission or the Board of Commissions gets this again before the Planning Commission does?
So the Board of Commissioners continued their hearing to July 16th, 2024. If the board would like to hear the matter sooner than that, so let's say that scenario that you're outlining does happen, we decide that, there is a legal challenge, the ballot measure is not going to happen. The Board of Commissioners could make a decision to bring that forward. We would have to re-notice the Board of Commissioners hearing and go through that process of letting the community know it's back on the board's agenda, this is going to be the date. If that were to happen, staff would also bring that to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission could then make that same decision of re-noticing a hearing in order to hear the matter in advance of the board making their recommendation.
Thank you. And the timing worked out okay for that to be the sequence.
I am skeptical that there is enough time to resolve whether or not the ballot measure is legally supposed to be there before we print ballots and arrive at the May election at this time. Time seems to move very quickly. It's already the beginning of December. So I think it's a somewhat unlikely scenario, just given the way the timing plays out. It would be difficult for us probably to get through the noticing process in order to do that. It may not be worth that effort. So there's a remote chance that could happen, but I would make that commitment to you that we would certainly attempt to bring it to the Planning Commission before it went to the board. And I think that would be the board's preference as well, not to speak for them, but the board generally does want to receive the recommendation from the Planning Commission before they hold their hearings. So it's a remote possibility, but if it happened, we would lay out a timeline for that.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask a follow-up question? I'm sorry.
Okay.
Can we request the same presentation if we do this next meeting so you don't have to make a new one?
You could request that. We may want to just update it with anything we need to add to inform you on your decision.
Thank you. That's all my stuff.
Commissioner Kaiser, you've got your hand is down at this point. Yeah. And I believe Commissioner Fry is next. I'm not sure.
Yes, thank you. I have a question. I think it's in a similar vein to a lot of the questions we've been asking, but what if we do choose option 4, which has now been motioned? Are there any ramifications to that choice in terms of, I don't know, anything within staff timing or having to redo things or anything, or is it just that we're possibly not having enough time for the county commissioners to make their decisions, or is it really just waiting until we have the referendum and it's not going to cause any other delays?
I can weigh in on that from the staff perspective. It's a regular continuance, just like we continued the matter to today, and so from a staff perspective, there's really no problem with this, and it would allow for time to write a staff report based on the outcome of that meeting on June 26th and get it to the board in advance of their July 16th hearing. So from a timing perspective, this works fine for staff.
And just adding on to that, we did set June 26th because that is after the election would be, what is the term?
Certified.
Certified. After the election would be certified. So we would know the official results of the referendum election, and we could report that to the Planning Commission at that time.
Commissioner Potter?
Thank you. Since we are still in deliberations and talking about this, I wonder if should this go on the ballot and all of it, but regardless, is there a possibility of us being able to meet with diverse North Plains community members? There are two things, 2 questions and 2 requests, so that the community can engage with planning commissioners and talk to them, and also could we get some information on outreach to communities of color who are moving to North Plains, because they have not been, they do not know about this, they do not understand the details about it. Can the county, the city, can we make those requests so that diverse community members know about this UGB expansion, the consequences, and the pros, cons, the potential of this whole project. So thank you.
We can certainly reach out to North Plains staff and find out more information about engagement and their engagement plans. County staff don't have a plan to do additional engagement on this particular ordinance, nor do we have funding or staff capacity to take that on at this time. However, I expect that this will be on the May ballot, and so as a part of that ballot measure, I expect there will be a lot of communications with the community about this issue.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? I'm not seeing any, so I think we're ready to have the...
Chair Lockwood, I had one more. The question that I asked first, is there a potential possibility for planning commissioners to meet with North Plain residents to speak with them in a community setting versus in a formal setting like this one? Could we ask for that?
Rob, would you want to weigh in on that?
Sure. I think it'd be the same answer as Aaron gave. I think any such community outreach would probably be in the context of the ballot measure that's coming forward. And that would probably be driven by or around the city of North Plains itself. We really don't have a process or a capacity to really engage in that. And it gets very tricky once a ballot measure has been certified onto the ballot. General public officials who are not elected officials have really serious limitations on what they can do in their official capacity in relation to an active ballot measure. So we would probably defer that to community groups in the city of North Plains itself to engage in that conversation around the ballot measure.
Great, thank you. And there is no problem if I engage with them as community member, as a community leader?
No legal problem. I have to be honest, it does make me a bit unsettled to say the least, since you are at least making a recommendation to our Board of Commissioners. So I guess I would encourage you to talk to LUT staff to make sure that engagement doesn't, not legally, but functionally compromise your ability to do what you need to do as a PC member. So we would probably want to work very carefully about anything like that. But we also need to be careful too, because it's now been certified as a ballot measure.
Great, thank you.
And again, on the staff side, this ordinance was authorized in our planning work program by the Board of Commissioners. Conducting any additional effort or staff capacity around it beyond what's already been authorized would be a decision for the board to make. And so it would be a longer conversation.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Not seeing any, so I think we're ready to take a vote on the motion to continue deliberations on Ordinance 889 to June 26, 2024.
Commissioner Fry?
Yes.
Commissioner Havner?
Yes.
Commissioner Kaiser? He did join us at 2:02, but...
Yes.
Oh, there he is. Commissioner Milliman?
Yes.
Commissioner Maury Bidu?
Yes.
Commissioner Podar?
Yes.
Commissioner Will?
Yes.
Chair Lockwood?
Yes.
That makes 8 yeses, so the motion does pass.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation, and thank you, commissioners, for your deliberations on that. We are now ready to consider the minutes for September 20th, 2023. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? I'm not seeing any hands up about that. Any objections to passage, to acceptance of the minutes as submitted? Seeing none, without objection, the minutes are accepted. Planning Commission minutes for October 18th, 2023. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? Not seeing any hands up. Without objection, the minutes for October 18th, 2023 are accepted as submitted. Next item on the agenda is public communication. I think we had a couple of people signed up for public communication. I believe Dale Feek is first.
Chair Lockwood and Commissioners, I'm Dale Feek, Chair of the Washington County Citizen Action Work, member of the community of Washington County since 1966, living in Forest Grove. I like the decision that you made in postponing this. I think it's appropriate, especially since the county commissioners made their decision to not act on it until later. And so it's important to find out what the residents, the voters of North Plains want to do before you make a recommendation. And I agree that your recommendation would be of no good. So I imagine it'd be good, and it'd be good that you've talked and you're resolving ways to get the business done. And so I appreciate the time all of you have volunteered, because you've been recommended by particular commissioners based upon what area they're in. And so you're a volunteer, not paid, and you're working toward the common good of the planning for development in the county, and looking at all sides of the issue for economic development, but also what's best for the environment and for public health. I particularly like what the report, I have, all right, time's up there. I like what the significant natural resources report, and I'm glad it was put on the agenda first, because you had staff here before last time and they didn't get to it because of the time spent on the first agenda item. And I did have a chance to go over and look at the maps over at the county, and when Jim Long and others helped facilitate all that, and the county is doing a good job, effective job, thorough job of taking a look at significant natural resources and trying to really come up with what's appropriate and what's right. And so I acknowledge what the staff has done in doing that, the planning department and everybody. I had a question about North Plains when I went over and looked at those maps, and I really quite can't remember whether North Plains was on a map and you have to consider significant natural resources. But the county's doing a good job in taking a look at what needs to happen and getting significant natural resources up to date. So I think I've said everything I want to say. So thank you. I appreciate your hard work and your volunteers, and particularly appointed by certain Board of Commissioners by their districts that they're in. And I'm glad that people make their statements of possible potential conflict of interest, and I'm glad that that's acknowledged openly in a public meeting, which it should be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Feek. Chair Harrington.
Hello, Chair Lockwood and Commissioners. I'm here today to thank you for your service. My colleagues and I on your Washington County Board of Commissioners greatly appreciate your role in doing all of the work of the Planning Commission. I know from serving as the county chair in a wide array of public meetings that it can be difficult to, challenging to take in information in public hearings as well as during your deliberations. But I know you do so with care. Even I have to remind myself to expect the unexpected and just take a deep breath and see how it goes. I know that you each work to review information ahead of time and to take in all of the in-person information, whether it's from staff or our community members or from one another. You're human too. Thank you for what you do. Nope, it's a genuine thank you. There's nothing hidden in my words as I deliver them to you today. Commissioner Milliman, I appreciated what you said earlier. If it helps you feel any better about it, do feel free to communicate directly with the mayor of North Plains or staff. Phone call, email, card, whatever. It's all about what will help you continue to serve in your role. But I heard your words today, and I thank you all for your service. Goodbye.
Thank you, Chair Harrington. Next item on the agenda is Planning Commission announcements. Do any commissioners have something they'd want to share at this time? Not seeing any hands. Next item is adjournment without objection. Yes, Commissioner Will, I see you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I want to make sure you didn't wrap that gavel. I think staff had asked us to confirm or give input on the canceling of scheduled meetings coming up in the next couple cycles. Can we confirm that? I think I was willing to.
Thank you.
I don't have anything to add to the agenda. I think I support canceling them.
Good catch. Thank you very much. Is there any objection to canceling our meetings on December 20th and January 3rd? I see no objection to that. So I think we're ready to adjourn. Thank you very much, everybody, for your participation today. And happy holidays.
Bye-bye. Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays, everyone.